Hello, and welcome to In the Kitchen with Brett Thorne, a food service industry podcast by Nation's Restaurant News and Restaurant Hospitality. I'm your host, Senior Food and Beverage Editor Brett Thorne, reporting to you from our New York City headquarters, where I've been spending the past day or so writing about new celebrity collaborations with restaurant chains. These sorts of collaborations have been going on for decades, but they really seem to be picking up speed lately. A couple of examples are Ben Affleck doing another commercial with Dunkin', this time with rapper Ice Spice, to promote a new frozen coffee drink that has munchkins spun into it, in case that's something that you're interested in. Also, Friendly's, another New England chain, has collaborated with the Jonas Brothers on Sundays. All three of the Jonas Brothers, Joe, Nick, and Kevin, have, according to Friendly's, collaborated with the chain to develop their favorite Sundays. And if any of the Jonas Brothers wanted to sit down with me for a Sunday, I'd be happy to do that, but I would not follow Nick's recommendations for what to order, because apparently his favorite sundae starts with vanilla fat-free frozen yogurt, and if I'm gonna have a sundae, there's going to be ice cream in there. Apparently the Jonas Brothers grew up on Friendly's, and as I said, it's a New England brand, but I know that the Jonas Brothers are from New Jersey, because my former boss, the great Pam Parsegian, used to have me over for Thanksgiving, and I met some of her nephews, and they had actually gone to high school with the Jonas Brothers, so that's fun. A celebrity in my book is Michael Schlow, who is my guest today on In the Kitchen, and he has been working in restaurants also in New England for a long time. He operates a bunch of restaurants there, and also in Washington, D.C., and we had a really nice conversation about what he has been working on. This is one of the first times in a while that we kind of look back at COVID and how he adjusted. It's something that not a lot of people super enjoy talking about, but Michael Schlow wanted to reflect on that, and he also talks about how the industry has changed and what he's working on, and it is a nice conversation that I hope you will enjoy. One last note, if you want to listen more about the celebrity collaborations, one of our other podcasts, First Bite, is reporting on exactly that topic. It's online now, available wherever podcasts are found. And now, please enjoy my conversation with chef and restaurateur Michael Schlow. The last time I saw you, Michael Schlow, we were having breakfast at some point before the pandemic at a hotel in Midtown Manhattan.
I think we were. Do you remember which hotel it was? And is it
No.
still there?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's wherever you were staying, I think.
I think it was. I kind of remember it being in Midtown and being like this really good breakfast. I want to say it was the place called Norma's or something like that. Was this breakfast?
Yeah, I mean, that is a famous
I think that's where we met.
At the Parker Meridian, I think.
Yes, I think that's where we went to, and it was great.
It could be. I do remember the breakfast being very tasty, so that was nice.
So, yeah, it's been a while.
Yes. Well, time has been telescoped, and, I think we all still have a bit of fog going on.
Agreed.
But what are you up to these days? You got a bunch of restaurants in New England and the DC area.
Yeah, I mean, COVID really changed the landscape of my company. We had grown quite a bit prior to the pandemic, and we were really all over the country. We had restaurants that we were involved in West Hollywood, Santa Fe, New Mexico. We had done a consulting project outside of Detroit, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Massachusetts, certainly Washington, D.C., Virginia, Maryland. And like many companies, COVID really wreaked havoc on that. And for a variety of reasons, some were landlord issues. Some were just an issue where if, there was no office tenancy, then we just couldn't survive. We were hoping for that. So we sort of, like everybody else, we hunkered down and a lot of things closed. We're a much smaller company right now, but we're emerging from COVID and things are starting to look prosperous again. And so we're sort of just in the rebuilding mode. So we still have some restaurants in Boston area, and we have some restaurants in the DC area, just a lot smaller company right now.
And that's happening a lot of places. We've just been reporting about how a bunch of chains are sort of justifying how they're closing a bunch of restaurants. And obviously a lot of people have gone out of business and retrenched and stuff. So how has the pandemic or whatever the past year shifted your priorities?
Well, I think my priorities remain the same. And that is, as far as, certainly when it comes to business and life, and that is to, make food that I could be proud of and provide great hospitality. I think a couple of things that certainly happened, and we talk about this all the time, and that is that we're starting to emerge from it. But prior to COVID, I would say there was zero meetings that I attended that didn't use the word culture. Everybody's talking about the culture of your company, the culture of your team. Are you like-minded? And while we all still were, when you got into that defensive stance of just protecting and trying to stay alive during COVID, culture started to not be part of the conversation, where it was just sort of put on the back burner. And I see that is a term in my company that's emerging again, which makes me very, very happy because doing a Zoom call or, doing things on the internet in general, whether it's email or what have you, it's hard to build culture. I do think you need to be in the room together. And so it changed, and so, so many things for our company changed, and so many things we learned about our company things that we can't do without, and then things that, maybe we could live without. So it became, as always, very much a story of needs versus wants. So at the beginning, it was, what do we need versus what do we want? Because you're trying to just get by. And the other part that was interesting, and I'm not happy about this part, but it is a reality, is the notion of making things leaner. When I say leaner, I mean hours of operation, what time staff comes in, the foods and the menu engineering, all those things that were always important became that much more important, I think, because you really didn't have any choice. And so you're figuring out, like, how can I provide a really great looking menu and really delicious food? But I know it's to go for most of it at the beginning of the pandemic. So we changed recipes, even. Like, I'm such a stickler about pasta. When I first started my career, I wouldn't sell pasta to go because I was afraid you're going to put it in the microwave. And then I realized, I have no control once it leaves my hands. And so we changed, when we were all to go shop, we changed the way we make pasta, and we made it a little, what I'll call, saucier, so that as you drove it home, it didn't become this like lumpy mess that you couldn't that you would just put your fork in the middle of it and the whole bowl of pasta would come out. So we made it a little saucier, and guests recognized that and realized that we were making little subtle changes to the way we were preparing food. Now that we're out of COVID and hopefully it does not come back, fingers crossed, I think that people are once again looking for experiences. And that's a word you hear all the time now, is I'm looking for a great experience. So that's not just food. That's all of the things we put together. And I've always believed that, but I think it's become highlighted even more so now.
That has to be interesting as a chef. And I'm a food writer. So, in my heart, I want it all to be about the food, but it never has been. I mean,
nope, never.
It's always been sort of a combination of the service, and the most important thing of any meal is who you're eating with, and you can't control that as
sure
an operator. And then as long as the food meets expectations, everyone's going to have a great time. You got good lighting, the temperature's right, all of that stuff.
Yeah, I've always believed that dining in a restaurant is really about all five senses. And so what's the last thing you get to do in a restaurant? Eat the food. Right? Think about it. It's the last thing you get to do. You first have to walk in. What are you hit with for ambiance? What's the greeting? Hospitality takes a gesture, takes movement. And so I always felt, well, yeah, the food will ultimately be the thing. And over the course of my career, I realized, no, it's just part of the thing. And, how are you greeted? Was your reservation on time? Was your martini cold? Was your server knowledgeable about the foods that they're preparing for you and that we're preparing for you? Did they know a wine list? Whatever it is. And I think that people will always want that, even though we are getting more and more used to automation and convenience. And unfortunately, some of that convenience, the experience changes. So, like, I was never a user prior to COVID. I was never a user of delivery apps. I used them in my business, and they accounted for 2, 3, 4% of our revenue. But when you're locked up at home, and I was out working because of what I do for a living, I couldn't be home, so I was working. But I found myself on the occasions that I was home, I would call, a delivery service to bring some food. And there is a convenience factor of it. But then you're sitting in your house and you're eating out of a, cardboard or plastic container, and you realize the food is important, but there's no experience other than maybe the convenience, and you're eating in your sweatpants, in front of the television. But yeah, I think that there's been so many changes to our industry, and there hopefully will be some good things that come out of this. And then I think, unfortunately, we're going to lose some things that we always valued, and that part's unfortunate. But it's just evolution.
Well, and it seems like we were going in that direction before the pandemic anyway. There was already more automation. The delivery apps were already wreaking havoc on the industry, while not making money themselves, but taking profits away from the restaurants. And that was a concern before everything shut down.
What they did, Brett, it was interesting marketing campaign, the way that they would sell it to us, the operators. This is a way to get more eyes on your business without like increasing rent and all this sort of thing. And so when it was a very small component of your business, only a few percentage points, you're like, okay, so maybe, if Brett's looking through and scrolling through and says, oh, I always wanted to try Alta Strada. Maybe I'll just get it delivered. And then if I like it, I'll go to the restaurant. And we all bought into that. That's fine. But when it became, 80, 90, 100% of your business during COVID, it was no longer viable. We already work on such slim margins. You can't be paying somebody an enormous amount of the ticket to deliver the food. What I never understood about, like, Uber Eats as an example, when I call Uber to take me to the airport, they don't ask me how much I weigh. They don't ask me how many people are with me. They don't ask me how many bags I have. They don't ask me what was the price of the ticket you're going to fly on. How is that going to affect our price? It's about coming from point A to point B. So what I don't understand about Uber or DoorDash or any of these other companies is why what the amount of what you purchased is how they calculate your charge. Why not say, like a taxi cab, it's a flat charge. It's for me to take it from here to your house, Brett, it's $10. And if you want to leave a tip, leave a tip. But, oh, wait, it's a hamburger in that bag, so it's $7. It's a filet mignon in that bag, so it's $47. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It seems the more you order, the more money they make. And doesn't change the gas needed to go there, doesn't change the driver, doesn't change anything. And I think it's a flawed system that I hope somebody will give these companies some healthy competition and do flat pricing.
That's a good idea. And I imagine you still use third-party delivery at your...
Don't have a choice. Yeah, we really don't have a choice. But, it is the thing that when the restaurants get super busy, and luckily now today, the in-dining is back. And so there are times, certainly when it gets so busy that you have to turn those third-party apps off. That's when I feel bad in that, somebody wanted our food and couldn't get it. The old days, you'd call up a restaurant and say, hey, can I place an order to go? And you'd go to the bar and wait for your food to be ready. And there was something, I don't know, nostalgic and good about those days, but it's just changed. And like I said, it's convenience, but we've all gone on those apps and sometimes they'll say, it's an hour or it's a busy time and call back later. And so there's some frustration with it as well. There's good and bad, like there is with everything.
Yeah, well, I stayed in my apartment for 13 months basically, and the day that my second vaccine was supposed to kick in, I went out and ate in a restaurant and
Yeah.
back. And even now, I don't use the delivery apps. What I do, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners do the same thing, is go on the restaurant's website, figure out how they want me to order
That's
delivery.
the best. So if people can do that, like on our websites, we do have flat pricing. So if you wanted to save money, you go on my website versus going to Uber Eats or DoorDash or Lyft or any of these Grubhubs, and it is less expensive. Most people don't realize that. I think a lot of restaurants do offer, if you go to their website and at least try, you can get a delivery service. Like we've partnered with the delivery service, so it's flat and it's a lot less expensive than all these fees that you get hit on. At the same token, the convenience in having all these apps, it does help our business. It's just a big chunk of money, and they end up charging us huge. They're doing it on both ends. You, the final consumer, pays for it, and we, the operator, pays for it. How they're not making money is beyond me. They
Yeah,
should.
pretty
They should.
incredible.
Yeah.
But there's also the concern as an operator. I saw a study recently that indicated how much less satisfied customers are when they're not eating in the restaurants. They have complaints. It took too long, which of course it did. The food's not the right temperature. Obviously, it's not the right temperature. There are so many issues. The orders are often inaccurate. These are the really common complaints. And something like 50% of delivery ratings for people who rate them get 1 star, which
Wow.
can't
Wow.
be good. Almost.
No. Well, and the other part about eating in the restaurant, that might be the very best part. We clean up after you. You don't have to clean up.
Love that.
That right there is the best part of the experience. You don't have to do the dishes. You don't have to clean up. You don't have to take the garbage out. We take care of everything.
Well, and just to sit and have people bring you stuff is really great.
But it's funny in that we look at it in our company also as a privilege, and it's something that I teach constantly, daily, really, is you don't need us. The reality is you can go to a supermarket, you go to a delivery app, you can get food, you can feed yourself. Even if you don't know how to cook, you can feed yourself. You can go and get something to eat and everything. And so that when you come into our door and you come in and allow us to take care of you, you are giving us a privilege, really. You're giving us a privilege to not only earn a living, put a roof over our heads, put food on our tables, but you're also giving us something extra special, which is you're giving us that privilege. We get to be part of your daily life. We get to be part of birthdays and celebrations and anniversaries and deal closings, or, a proposal, or even just two people sitting and having a good time. And that experience cannot be mimicked at home in the same way. Don't get me wrong. I love a great dinner party. It's so much fun. I'll cook the dinner party for you, but it's not the same as a restaurant and the music and the energy. It really is irreplaceable. I do think that there will be long-term less and less full service restaurants, because I just think that's a way of the future and evolution, and things like, having a QR code, and, somebody will still deliver your food maybe, but you ordered it yourself. There'll be these hybrids, as they are popping up all over the place now. But the experience of somebody taking you to your table, bringing you a menu, bringing you a drink, serving you food, interacting, and you get to interact with your guests, I don't think that will ever, ever, ever go out of style. We will always have full service restaurants.
Do you have any restaurants that are not full service?
Yes. I mean, we're in a couple of food halls. So those two, you walk up to the counter. We still make the food fresh. We make it at the same integrity that we would make the food in a full service restaurant. But the two food halls, one is Time Out in Boston, one is Hub Hall in North Station at the TD Garden. One's a burger joint called Sauce. The other one's called Michael Schlow's Italian Kitchen. The food's delicious, but you walk up to a counter, you order, and we give you your order. So it's a little bit faster. Prior to COVID, we had been working on our version of a fast casual restaurant. And I was so excited to do this. It was called Prima. And Prima was going to be, or we got off to, we were only open for a few months before COVID struck. It was a fast casual Mediterranean restaurant where you walked up, the food was very fresh. There was no stainless steel. It was the sort of antithesis of what you see in a lot of these fast casual places where it's just stainless steel and they're scooping. Beautiful, colorful bowls of fresh vegetables and legumes, and there was chicken and salmon and shrimp. There's all kinds of stuff, and it was healthy. It was Mediterranean, but you could walk into the line, and if you knew what you wanted to eat, you could walk down that line and get out in a minute, and have really, really well prepared food, and it could be lunch or dinner. Well, unfortunately, we opened up, 6 months before COVID, and that was just not going to work. So we shut it down, and I don't know, maybe someday we'll reopen it. I don't know. But I think those concepts, if you were to try to enter the market today, they need density of population in order, if they don't have brand equity, the Sweet Greens and Cavas of the world, the Shake Shacks, they have brand equity already. And so they are continuing to grow off of their good name, which is great. They're great companies with really good food, good product, fresh product, and I use them. I go and I eat at those places. So Primo was just getting started. There's no brand equity. I think it's hard. It's going to be harder and harder for new fast casuals until the workforce comes back to work. I think it's going to be hard for fast casuals to get any real traction right now.
It's interesting that some companies who should know about brand equity because they've spent often generations building brand equity, then started launching a bunch of virtual brands, and a lot of them didn't do well because because people didn't know who they were, and
everybody. And I think also COVID, out of desperation, people were just throwing any kind of idea at the wall. I myself included. We created a pizza ghost kitchen, that was like just a fun wings, pizza, whatever. It did a little bit of business, but nothing to write home about. It had no, like you said, no brand equity. Nobody knew it. And if you're not out walking the streets to see a bricks and mortar place, or you didn't catch on, that's interesting. There's a place here. I'm in DC right now. I'll be back in Boston tomorrow. There's a place here in DC that the ghost kitchen did so well, it turned into a bricks and mortar place. So some people were very successful with it also.
Yeah, there are a few that have opened restaurants, and it's funny. They're like, no, the model of the future is this
just the ghost kitchen. I don't know if that's the case. I mean, I think people probably got a little overzealous about some of these that, I mean, yes, it's almost like Disney World when you think about it. Let's call one place and we'll be able to get Chinese, Thai, Indian, American. I understand it, but the reality of carrying all those food products and all that different equipment and all the different types of cooks necessary to do that, I think would be a daunting task. There was a place in DC that was trying to open up, I think it was like 11 or 12 concepts under one ghost kitchen roof. That's going to be hard to do, I think. And I think it's going to be hard to do where it would all get out at the same time also, just to coordinate it. But, maybe somebody could do it and figure it out, which would be amazing. I'm not the guy for that one.
Well, I mean, there is an alternative in real life that used to be called a food court, and now it's a food hall.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah. And, the one thing I would say about the food halls is they are trying to have a higher quality of food, which I appreciate. They're not all successful. Obviously, some are doing better than others, but they're also not the end-all be-all answer to your potential retail woes. It's got to be good, and it's got, you end up with a rev share in these food halls, and it's got to make sense. If the food hall is charging too much on the rev share side, there's no money to be made, and then why are you doing it? So you gotta balance art and commerce. You got to be able to make good food, but you have to be able to make some money off of it too. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. So, like I said, the margins are just so slim. So labor continues to be, not an issue as far as finding people, but just the sheer cost of it. It is the most expensive thing in restaurants today, aside from, also rent. And I think rents and landlords, much as they don't want to hear it, there's been a tremendous amount of pressure put on the food and beverage industry when it comes to retail, because as retail goes by the wayside and as its bricks and mortar retail becomes less and less, who's going to take those spaces? They can't all be banks, coffee shops, gyms, or restaurants. They just can't. And so I think there's a lot of pressure on the restaurants, and it's sort of, it's a domino effect. If there's more restaurants, there's only so many restaurant workers to go around. And so how do you end up staffing your place if instead of let's just say a small town could handle 6 good restaurants, and instead, because of the landlords being unable to rent some of these spaces to traditional retailers, there's 10 restaurants. Well, there's still the same amount of restaurant workers in the town, perhaps. And so you end up with a thinning of the herd a little bit, and it just makes things a little bit more difficult. But again, I remain very optimistic about the industry. I remain optimistic about people wanting a good experience, that they're never going to change from that. They're always going to want it. And yeah, I mean, it's just, you have to go to the places where you think that you're going to do well. And for me, having infrastructure and people that I can count on and are like-minded, people I want to work with, those are the important things. I think that's another thing that came out of COVID, is realizing how important it is, not only what are you doing, but who are you doing it with, and making sure you're with like-minded people and that you're having fun doing it. Because COVID wasn't fun, that's for sure. We used to laugh all the time and have a good time, and it was dead serious, obviously. But luckily we came through it, and company's still standing. So I'm very, very proud of the men and women that I work with. They did an amazing job to band together, and I don't know that I could ever properly show my gratitude for what they were willing to do. And I did it side by side with them, washing dishes and taking the garbage out and making deliveries and making pizzas every day, or whatever it was that we were doing. So it was I wish it never happened, obviously, like everybody, but I'm also proud of everybody that I got to, go through it with.
Yeah, we learned a lot. That was useful. I know my life is better. I really did not enjoy COVID, and I try, obviously, and I try to remember what I did during those 13 months when I basically didn't go anywhere, and my brain just puts up a wall and says, no, we're not going to remember that.
Yeah, I think that we all have a little PTSD from it, there's for sure. And I don't know if you feel the same way, Brett, but I get confused about what year certain things were occurring also sometimes. Like, was that 20 or 21? Because it was horrible. I was at the beginning of it, before there was any testing, and because I had to work, I didn't see my family. I didn't see my kids. My now ex-wife and I talked about it, and like, I would be overridden with such guilt if I brought COVID home from work and gave it to my kids, and I just, I stayed away from the house. I worked and stayed away. It was not pleasant. We did video calls every day, twice a day, and the kids were home, but luckily, we're moving on, and we're rebuilding, and lots of new stuff in the works for us. We're looking at building some new restaurants. We've been doing one of the interesting projects we've had, and it was on board to open April 1st, 2020, was a restaurant at Logan Airport, an Alta Strada at Logan Airport, that we were partnering with Delaware North to do this. And everybody's trained, everybody's ready to open, and literally the day we were supposed to open, they shut the airport down. And so that thing was mothballed for a year. It just sat there empty. We got it reopened, and it's doing well. We've got 2 restaurants at Logan Airport, and they're doing well. And just trying to find new and exciting projects, mostly in places that we already are. So it's really primarily New England and Washington, D.C. that we continue to focus on. But the hotel industry has been an interesting one for us, and it's where we've sort of had our bread and butter for a long time. So we're seeing that hotel industry starting to come back. We had lost a bunch of restaurants in hotels. Either they were sold or they closed permanently, or the contracts weren't renewed. And we're seeing that business starting to come back, that's encouraging. That means people are traveling again, some businesses coming back, but we're definitely seeing a big spike in the hotel industry.
Yeah, a lot of multi-concept operators such as yourself are relying on hotels or leaning on hotels. I guess because they have the infrastructure, they have somewhat of a captive audience. When
it's a win-win. I think what's happened, and the people that I know well in the hotel industry, they've always said what we do best is the rooms. That's what we do the best. And what we don't do best is we can't take the same attitude we do about the rooms and try to bring it into food and beverage. And so for a lot of them, they'd much rather sub that food and beverage out to somebody like myself, where we have an entrepreneurial spirit versus a lot of these hotels have more of a protective stance, so to speak, where they've got too much layer of management and too many people working, and they can't make any money, even though they're making good gross revenue. I would say to them, if you took my labor model, my food and my cost of goods model, and injected this, and used it on your revenue side, you'd see a lot of bottom line profit from it, where they're not showing any bottom line profit from it right now. And so the other part is that some of the higher end hotels have certain brand standards that almost make it impossible to be profitable, because the brand standards are so high, whether it's on the uniforms or the labor model of how many people it takes to run a certain restaurant. It literally is impossible. So when we come in, we bring a different spirit to it, and it has been very successful across the country. As I said, whether it was out in West Hollywood or Santa Fe, New Mexico, or again, we did that project with Dartmouth. It's been very, very successful in the hotels, and so it's a win-win. The hotel owner and operator's happy, and we're happy because we have a good home, and where we can do breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I don't shy away from breakfast. I know a lot of chefs don't like to do it. I think it can be a great service if you make it fun and good food. I love breakfast, so I don't have an issue making it.
Yeah, breakfast is great. So I'm a fan, even though I don't eat it every day.
Yeah, I don't eat it often enough either, but I like it,
And just some sausage and eggs, I'm happy. So what are you working on now, Michael Schlow?
So I'm working on a bunch of projects right now. So one of the things that we started was we took a existing concept, Tico, in Washington, D.C., and we transformed it to Namako. I was lucky enough to get to partner with Derek Watson. Derek was the chef of Morimoto in Philadelphia. He also worked at Mamotoro as the chef in Chicago. Two of my favorite Japanese restaurants. And so we turned Tico into Namako, a Japanese, highly spirited, fun, big energy restaurant. And so Derek, and then we just have a fantastic team. Aziz is our general manager there. So we've been spending a lot of time on that. Alta Strada continues to grow. There's 5 Alta Stradas now. There's 3 in New England and 2 in DC. So there's 1 in Washington, DC, 1 in Maryfield, Virginia. Continuing to look for new locations for that as well. It's just a very casual, beloved Italian neighborhood restaurant. You're just going to get a good bowl of pasta. It's not a bucket list restaurant. It's the restaurant you go to once a week. And I like that. I love bucket list restaurants too. And, maybe someday I'll build something like a Radius again. But right now, focusing on restaurants that, are going to be very approachable, give you that experience that you're looking for, as we talk about, as everybody emerges from these past 3 years, and things that we can also feel really proud about, as we grow them. So, the focus is, there's one restaurant that I want to bring back that was a, unfortunate situation during COVID. It's a restaurant called the Rigsby, which is in Washington, D.C. And that hotel got sold, and where the Rigsby was, and the owner that bought it had their own food and beverage program coming. And so, obviously we understood that, but it was a much beloved restaurant in DC, and I'm looking for a new home for that right now. I think I found one, but it's not a done deal yet, but I'm looking for the home for the Rigsby, and just continuing to grow, but continue to grow with projects that we're interested in, and not doing it, simply for money. They've got to be part of the community. That we have this little criteria checklist that we always think about. Not only is the restaurant feasible and is it doable, but is it needed? Is it wanted in the community that it's going to be built in? Do we have the infrastructure? Are we going to be stretched thin to do this? Because it's important that people continue to grow in our company also. I know that I could never do this by myself, not in a million years. And so I want to make sure that the people that we work with are always feeling like they're in a learning environment, but they're also in an environment that provides, upward mobility and opportunity for them. So I feel very fortunate, Brett. I chose a career that doesn't feel like work. I love it. I could talk about it all day long, every day. I never get tired of it. If you want me to cook at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'll cook you something at 2 o'clock in the morning. And so I feel very fortunate. I never wake up on Monday like, oh, I got to go to work. No, I'm excited. I'm excited for the future.
You've been doing this a long time. How long have
Just
you?
call me old, Brett. Did you just call me old?
I feel like we're probably close to the same age, but I don't know. I mean,
I've been doing this for my whole life. I was 14 years old when I had my first dishwashing job, and I never looked back. I mean, I went to college and I went to culinary school and I did other things, but if I had one job, it was in food and beverage. Sometimes I might take a second job doing something else to earn extra money, like when I was in school or whatever. But I never stopped from the time I was 14 till today, being in the food and beverage industry. I've never done anything else. And I still cook all the time. I was cooking yesterday in the restaurants. I'm in a chef coat all the time. Sometimes I'm not, but often I am. And it's a tricky, the position that I'm in now, as the owner of the company, or one of the owners of the company, it's a tricky position in that I don't want to step on toes of the chefs that I have, but I want to be there to support them, coach them, provide that learning environment without, treating them like they're not the chef of the restaurant. They're the chef, and so they deserve that respect. And so there's collaboration, but at the end of the day, I've got to be respectful of their position also. So that part's a little tricky. Chefs want to put their stamp and their fingerprints on everything, and I've gotten to a point where I say I don't care where a good recipe comes from. I just care that it's a good recipe. So if it came from me, great. If it came from the chef, great. If it came from the dishwasher, I don't care. Just do the guests enjoy it, and does it fit in the concept that we have, decided this is what we're doing? If it's an Italian restaurant, let's not put tuna with nigiri rice, wasabi, and soy sauce on the menu. That's not going to fit in the menu. That doesn't fit in the concept. You want to do tuna crudo with radish, lemon, and some mint. Okay, you can get away with that. That sounds good. That sounds Italian enough. But allowing them their freedom also and their ability to be creative, because I think we all want that. We didn't get into this industry to just be like, here's the menu, cook this. If that's the case, you'd probably go work for, maybe a chain restaurant. Not that there's anything wrong with it, obviously. It's just different.
Well, it's interesting that, you started out loving cooking, I assume, and now you cook less and you have to do the psychological work of nurturing every one of your employees, which is that's not how cooking starts. You know what I
No,
mean?
it's not. I mean, I think cooking comes, for me anyway, it started with wanting to provide. And I still feel this way. Cooking started with the notion of being not only creative, but there's something about the act, whatever it is that you do. If you're a woodworker, like my grandfather, he was a furniture maker. If you can do something with your own two hands and then give it to somebody else and watch their reaction, and if that reaction is positive, that's gratifying. There's very few professions that I can think of that something comes in the back door, a product comes in the back door, you manufacture that product, and then your distribution center is right next, right through the next set of doors. If you make a product, a computer, let's say, the person that makes the computer never, or the computer that makes the computer never gets to see the end user using the computer. Sports, live sports, you could say, they get to see the reaction immediately. Live acting, drama, singing, anything in the arts like that. But if you make a movie, for example, that movie could take 3 years before the actor sees the reaction of the viewer before they get it. It's not instant. Ours is instantaneous. Now, it's not always good also, and sometimes it's bad, but when it's good, it's very, very gratifying. And I think it's what keeps you coming back for more. But there's not a lot of jobs like that, and I think that's one of the things that drew me to it. And there's something about the notion of providing for people, that giving something from your heart and something from your creative, mind and your soul. There's something about that that's just really has always like pulled me into this industry. And it's funny. There's I know it may not be the same sort of company as what I'm thinking, but I remember being touched by the commercial. I think it's for Red Roof Inn, where they say, "We'll always leave the light on." That hotel company, and the notion of like there's something that's waiting for you, that it's always there, and if it was, whether it's a nice day or a miserable day, that there's this shelter, and there's the notion of feeding somebody and taking care of it. It's so gratifying to me. It's hard to sometimes put into words, but emotionally, I know that the feeling is what brings me back every day to my restaurants. And it was never probably more evident than, we've spent a lot of time talking about COVID, but delivering food, and often, for free, to firemen and policemen and EMTs. We'd just deliver pizzas and pasta and stuff. And it felt good. I mean, my hero is and has been for a while is Jose Andres, feeding the world and taking care of people. I just think that, he's an amazing human being. I was, during the beginning of COVID, I drove a couple times from Boston to DC. And one time I was driving and I ran into Jose at a place called McPherson Square. He was delivering food by himself to homeless people, by himself. There was no cameras there. He wasn't looking for any applause. And I got out of the car and helped him. And, I said, how are you doing? This is before, this is a while ago. I said, how are you pulling all this off? And he said, I don't know. He's like, I just do it and I worry about the cost later, and now he's a juggernaut, and my hat's off to him. I think he's done some very, very, meaningful and special work. So I think that there's probably that same sort of thing about, it's not just helping people, but it's providing. It's the notion of, of providing something for somebody. It's just special. It feels good. It feels good.
Well, that is lovely. And we only have about 90 seconds left anyway. So I think that is a really great way to wrap up our conversation. It was a pleasure catching up with you.
Always a pleasure to speak with you too, bro. We'll have to meet up at Norma's one day soon and have some more breakfast.
Or I'll go to Boston or DC and we'll figure that out.
All right. So nice to see you. Thank you again for having me on. I really appreciate it. I wish you well.